Hey everyone, welcome back to Wolfman's Garage. No, cops aren't here, not getting arrested. This is my daily driver, 2010 Ford Crown Victoria Police Interceptor. It used to be an XOPP, well, it is an XOPP car, Ontario Provincial Police. Picked it up in Toronto, and it's been my daily driver for the last almost 2 years. So, been thrashing on it, beating on it, driving it back and forth to the airport to go to work, and I think it's time we show it a little bit of love. So it needs a tune-up and front suspension work. And I think the car is going by. And I think today we're going to start with the front. And I think today we're going to start with the front suspension. The steering on it is getting very tough to turn. It's almost like the wheels on a clock. It's very dangerous, to be honest with you. I went ahead and purchased both front struts, upper and lower control arms, sway bar links, and bushings. So we'll get doing that. So I'll be right back with all the parts. Okay. We're getting ready for the struts to come out. Before I jack the car up, there's where the strut mounts. See, that's on a bit of an angle and kind of rubbing into the strut tower. So, yeah, I think that's our smoking gun right there. I think it's what needs to be changed, and our control arm bushings are pretty well shot. So, hopefully, drives better after this. I'll even take it on a test drive after. Alright, so let's get to it. Okay, that blew my mind. All three of those rusty old nuts are actually loose. I can actually loosen them. They aren't seized on, which they look like they'd break off on the first chance they get. So that's a good thing. Those are 13 millimeter. If you're looking to do this yourself, yeah, 13 millimeter. And yeah, so anyways, I got that off. I'm gonna jack the car up and we'll get working on removing the bottom part. Alright, so my wheel's stuck on. So if you ever find your wheel stuck, you just put on a lug nut, just as loose as you can, just a couple threads, then take a hammer and then smack it without damaging the rim. Oh. I'm gonna be here a minute. Alright, got the wheel off. All I had to do was spin it around and tap it on the back of the rim, and it came off. Just gentle taps, but enough force to break it free. So, next step is we're going to be removing our caliper and our brake rotor and setting them out of the way. And then we can get at the spindle, which we can remove off of the upper and lower control arms. And then we can get the strut out. Alright, here we go. Okay, now that we have the caliper off and the rotor off, I just have the caliper sitting on the ground. There's no tension on that flex hose. Now, if you're on a lift or have it up higher than I do, make sure that you bungee cord or mechanics wire this up off. Keep the weight off of the flex hose, because you don't want that to break and stretch, or else you'll have brake failure. Next on the list is our sway bar, which bolts right in there, which should be, I'm thinking, about a 14 or a 15 millimeter. Anyhow, let's see. Alright, so now that we have the sway bar bushings undone, the top one here, we're going to see if we can't get the upper control arm and ball joint undone. Which is there. Those bushings are cooked, as you can tell. That's gone. And then we'll do the bottom. And the bottom will have a snap ring on the ball joint. I'm not sure if you can see that, but right there is a snap ring. We'll have to get that out. And yeah, that will have our spindle. We'll also have to pull our tie rod end off. our tie rod end right there. So yeah, let's get to work. Okay, so after a, let's say 12-hour rain delay, I was getting soaked and I just wanted to get it done, so I didn't record a lot of it. I was having trouble getting the tie rod end off, but just seized and old. I should probably get new tie rods next time. But this is an 18mm nut. It was stuck. What was happening was that the ball joint that's in the tie rod was actually spinning in the cup. So it was just spinning and it wasn't coming out. Now, if you had a pretty strong impact or pretty strong ratchet, you could get it out, but I was having trouble. So what I ended up doing was taking an 8mm socket on a small ratchet and putting it on here, which holds it in place, while I took a wrench and put it on and then turned it off by hand. So there goes the tie rod. Yeah, so now that we have the tie rod end off, we can start working at blasting the ball joints out. Since I've purchased both upper and lower control arms for both sides, I don't need to take the snap rings off the ball joints, so this will be much simpler. But if you're going to change your ball joints on your control arms, you'll have to get the kit. You can probably rent it from your auto parts store or buy one at Princess Auto, or Harbor Freight, or wherever you get your tools. So if you do a lot of it, you might as well buy one. But if it's a one weekend job, just can rent it and from your auto parts store. And yeah, anyhow, I'm gonna keep working at this and I'll keep you updated. All right, so I've jammed a 1/4-inch drive Allen bit into the bottom of the ball joint. Now we're going to take our ratchet and that'll help spin the ball joint. In theory. Ooh, maybe not. Oh, it's a little stiff. Oh, that out. All right, and then these will be 22mm as well. They'll just come right off. This will be a 24 for the upper control arm. Having a bit of trouble. Things are a bit seized, but we'll get her. Anyways, I'll keep you posted. Okay, so what's going on here? If you notice that the nut is turning with the bolt on the bottom of the ball joint, take a pickle fork or sometimes a pry bar, wedge it under, but a pickle fork kind of holds in place if you're working yourself. But wedge it into the ball joint. Now the idea of the pickle fork is to separate the ball joint from the spindle, so don't jam it in too far, just enough to keep the tension so it doesn't spin in the cup. Another trick, I'm replacing this control arm, so it doesn't matter, but when a ball joint gets worn out, this starts to cup, which means it's pushing its way through, getting loose. So take your ball peen hammer and smash on it, kind of make it so the ball won't turn inside the socket. So anyways, yeah, so I'm about to pull the top ball joint out. I'm having a frig of a time with the bottom one. You see here, yeah, the bottom one I'm having a bit of a fight with. Might have to employ the same method, so stay tuned. All right, through a lot of screaming and questioning my own sanity, I've got the top ball joint out of the upper control arm. having a little bit of trouble. Those threads are mashed on the bottom. So I'm trying to come up with a plan to be able to remove the spindle from the lower control arm and ball joint. So I'm replacing the lower control arm anyway. So I'm wondering if I'll just take it all as one unit and then separate it on a bench or something. Because I got 2 bolts left here to undo. I'll show that later. And 1 bolt here, which goes to the cradle. So that's our game plan. I'm thinking I could just take the strut out and everything if I undo it from the top under the hood. So that's what we're up to. And then after that I can replace the sway bar link. Anyways, it is hot out. Holy. Anyways, I'm probably going to get a water break in me and then get back to it. Alright, well, looking at this, I think I've made the executive decision to, while I still have the strut in, to undo the lock for this ball joint and see if I can't smash that ball joint out, and then grind the ball joint nut off the end of the spindle. So I'll keep you posted on that. Alright, now that I've cooled off a bit, I'm just taking the top strut mounts out, and I'm hoping I can remove the entire lower control arm with the strut attached, because I'm not using it anyway. So I can just throw it all out and then replace it all fresh. Note to self though, add some anti-seize when I put the bolts back in, because this is ridiculous. Okay, so I undid the tie rod end on the other side, and I've undone the sway bar, took it right out, and I was able to move the steering. I had to undo the steering rack. I pulled the stud out of this side, so then I pulled the steering rack far enough that I could get the bolt out that goes in here. So now I'm undoing the bolt that holds the strut into place. I used heat, so I'm just working away at it to get this bolt out, and then I gotta figure out a way of getting that out, the ball joint. But luckily I'm not reusing it. So also the pickle fork will destroy ball joint boots or tie rod boots, whatever you're using it on. So just be wary of that if you're ever using it. So luckily I have everything new except for the tie rods. I didn't use it on the tie rods though, so I'm not too concerned. So anyways, yeah, keep you posted. Okay, so update. It's been about 2 days later. I've just been running around trying to get things done before I head back to work. But so a recap, I got the lower control arm out, and to do so you actually have to move the power steering rack out of the way. I ended up removing the stud that holds it into place. It's just an 8mm fitting on the end you can turn off. I'd suggest working it because sometimes they do round off on you. In that case, just double up on the nuts and then it should turn out for you. So now these bolts were seized in place, so I'd use a lot of heat, penetrating oil, and I was in a rush, I was mad, you know. Ended up hammering the ends of the lock washers, so I ended up finding new nuts and having to put washers on. That's only a temporary thing. I can get more later. It's just I gotta get this done to go to work. So yeah, so now we're gonna work on reassembling the lower control arm and then putting the strut in place. So I'll keep you posted. So I've got the lower control arm in and the bolts in loose and the brackets in loose, just because it'd be easier to maneuver when I put the spindle back in place and to line up the upper control arm. Now the snap ring for the ball joint was actually down below its usual ring. I'm not sure if it was shipped that way or it was a mistake, but I put it back into place. So just be careful if you're doing this to make sure the snap ring's in place. I also orientated it so if I ever do this ball joint again, I'll be able to undo the snap ring easily from the side without having to remove anything. Anyways, so now I guess we'll work on getting the strut in, and then we can start bolting everything back together. All right. Ugh. So I didn't give you a view of it when I was taking it apart, but there is the part that bolts to the frame for the lower control arm. So there's 3 bolts, 1, 2, and then I'm not sure if you can see it, 3 back there. And this end slides into this bushing, and there's a cap on the end of it, but I'm just gonna snug these up, not run them up tight or anything, so I can still make adjustments if I have to for the alignment and everything. So anyways, I figured I'd give you a look at that. All right, lower control arm is in place and torqued to 133 foot-pounds, and we left the upper loose because we still have to put the spindle in place, and the strut's mounted in place. Everything's bolted up tight. Now we're going to put the spindle in. Okay, I lied to you. Now that we got this all set up and ready to go, we should probably go ahead and put the steering rack back in place. I have to put the stud back in its hole and bolt it back up, and be careful to not pinch or break any of the power steering lines. Okay, so I took the sway bar out and swung it all the way to the far side. I have to change these bushings. The old ones weren't bad, but I bought new ones just in case. So realistically, you'd want to grease in this hole. I don't have any grease, and I'm in dire straits because I have to get this car done so I can go to work. But I'll be doing the other side. I don't even know why I'm saying this, but anyways, I'm not greasing it, so you should put grease, automotive grease, in there, or it will squeak on you. But since I'm taking this all apart again to do the other side, I don't have to worry about it. Anyways, so it just slips over like so. Just give me a second with the camera here. So it just is just going to slip over like so. Just like that. And there you have it. And there's 2 of them, so you do that same on the other side. Just remember how they're lined up. Bumped up against this little pin here. I mean, not pin, the little collar there. So I'll do the other side and then start throwing it back together. All right, she's starting to look like a car again. I have the sway bar back in place with the new bushings. That's 4 15mm nuts that hold that in place. So before I put the spindle in, I'm going to put the sway bar link back into place so it's ready for when the spindle goes in. Less screwing around that way. Anyways, here we go. Okay. Well, sorry I rushed to get everything back together, but oh, fire trucks. Anyway, I live right down the road from the fire station. Sorry, last night I was in a scramble to get this thing back together. Yeah, I was getting carried away by mosquitoes. I just wasn't in the mood to film, to be honest. I was getting a little upset. Probably said a few words my grandmother pulled my ear for saying. So I have the brakes back together. Everything's just back together. It's pretty well reverse procedure, right? So last thing I have to do is actually tighten the nuts on the upper control arm. Now the trick for that is I have to set the suspension at ride height. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jack the car up and then put it down on a jack stand under the strut, so that way it will sit at ride height. So I'll demonstrate that now. Okay, so I have the jack stand under the strut. And now I'm about to lower the car onto it. Do this very slowly. Just let the car settle. That sounds about right there. Yeah, I'd say that's about right. Now, I can start tightening these bolts. I mean, these nuts, sorry. And then put the wheels back on it. Thank God. Now, it's July, so I should probably put my summers on. So I'll probably end up doing that. Anyways, yeah. Alright everyone, I'm not sure if you can see down that far, but I've replaced the steering shaft. It's actually a bit stiff at the moment, so I'm gonna have to get a new one, but I don't have the time. I'll have to limp it on until I can order the part. It's like $700 for the full assembly, so I'm gonna see if I can't how long I can go without, or I can find one cheaper. I don't know, at a wrecking yard or something. But anyways, so now that I have the steering shaft back in place, I'm gonna put our tires on and we should be good to go. We got the wheels back on it, and now I guess it's time to do a test drive. All right, well, we got the car back together, got the GoPro in place. Let's give her a test drive. Brakes are good. Brakes are good and all back together. Yeah, we stop. All right, let's see what happens when we try turning it. Not bad. Does she drive straight? Not quite. What the hey is going on here? This Tesla doesn't know enough to get off the road. Anyways, Tesla just pulled over. Maybe they think I'm a cop. I don't know. Anyways, there we go. Yeah, front end's got a bit of a noise to it. That might just be the new parts trying to break in. Let's see. Yeah, we got a bit of a pull. I only did the one side though, so I'm not surprised. And yeah, I mean, not bad. Could be the tires too, they're old tires. I'm sure you guys can hear me. Yeah, we'll just take her for a drive and see what happens. The steering ain't quite straight, so might need to make some more adjustments. But yeah, the steering wheel's off by a bit. Not a big deal. But I also discovered that the steering shaft that goes from the column to the rack is bent. I don't know how that happened, but that could also be partially why the steering is so stiff. It's not so bad now that I've changed those parts, but it still has some issues. So that will probably be next on my list. But right now I can go to work and everything's good. I'll do the other side when I get back and go from there. Yeah, so when I get back from work after 3 weeks, I'll be going to Alberta, so I might be filming again in Alberta, visiting my buddy Dano. Just posted, I'm not sure how long after that this video will air, but I just posted right like yesterday, the video of last year's Ritchie Bros auction that we went to. And yeah, it's just us walking around looking at stuff, just seeing what equipment, cars, trucks. They had a nice vintage collection for auction. I wish I had the money. Anyways, check that video out if you're interested in it. That episode is the first episode of Wolfman's Adventures. I'm hoping to get more of those in the books, but it's really hot out today, so I'm glad I just got this back together. Well, I guess I don't know how to end this video. This video was kind of rushed and unorganized, kind of in a panic. So I guess that'll do it for this episode of Wolfman's Garage. So I guess, yeah, I'll holler at you later.